Hello again. One of the weirdest things which I've read in my newspaper this morning is a statement made by a man called Tony Burnett, who is the chief executive for Kick It Out, English football's equality and inclusion organisation. Here is what he had to say about the English team's insistence on kneeling on the pitch before games begin. Gareth Southgate and the England players have made their position really clear. They are taking the knee as an anti-discrimination gesture. It is in no way linked to any political organisation. Why do I find this weird? Well, for one thing, the person making this statement is head of a body for inclusion. That is to say, including everybody. A YouGov poll of 4,500 football fans in Britain, undertaken in March this year, found that just 54% of them, that's very slightly over half, were in favour of players making this gesture. How can you possibly be running something which promotes inclusion and then campaign for an action which divides supporters in half? I honestly don't get it. Rather than bringing about inclusion, this is actually creating fierce division among football fans. That is a strange kind of inclusion, to say the very least of it. The other point is one so glaringly obvious that I wonder if Tony Burnett is in full possession of all his faculties. The idea of taking the knee began in 2016 among black American football players. It is traditional to stand for the playing of the national anthem in the United States before sports matches, but some players, black players, decided to kneel instead as a protest against racism. This reminds one of the black power symbols in the 1960s when black American athletes on the Olympic podium raised their clenched fists like this to show their support for that movement. Taking the knee, though, only arrived in Britain in 2020, and it was imported by the Black Lives Matter movement in the wake of the protests over the death of George Floyd. The fact that he had died with a knee pressing on his throat gave the gesture an added significance. You can see why it became popular. Here is a man who died with a white police officer's knee on his throat, and taking the knee looks as though it's connected with that act, which some denounced as a racist murder. It was unknown in Britain before that time, and it was the Black Lives Matter movement which brought it to the country. Whatever you might think about the symbolism of taking the knee, it is a political gesture, indicating that you agree with and support the aims of the Black Lives Matter movement, or the Black Liberation Movement as they now style themselves. This is a Marxist organisation devoted to the abolition of society as it is presently constituted and its replacement by socialism. Whether you agree with this aim or oppose it, that is what they are after, and anybody who does not know this must, I would suggest, be deaf, dumb and blind. Now, I have no use for racial prejudice, but neither do I want to see a socialist society. I seldom make public signs of my opposition to the practice of racial prejudice, and if I was going to do so, I would avoid one which had been adopted and enthusiastically championed by a bunch of Marxist activists dedicated to the overthrow of society. I might not boo if I saw people showing their support for such a group, but I would probably raise my eyebrows a little. To claim that it has nothing to do with politics is quite absurd. I have an idea that there's going to be trouble at the next matches which England plays at Wembley. As I remarked earlier this morning, the police have promised to have undercover officers mingling with the crowd and watching out for anything which they interpret as racist behaviour, including any spoken words or chants. They will also have firearms teams and, most bafflingly of all, and I still haven't been able to work this out, Marine units standing by. Since one section of the crowd is likely to be cheering this pointless behaviour by the England team and the other half booing it, the potential for trouble is obvious. One wonders if and when fighting does begin, who the police will blame for it. Will they go after those who were clapping and applauding the taking of the knee? Or will they instead zero in on the members of the crowd who were booing? This is a tricky one. I suspect that they will put booing the taking of the knee in the same category as they would monkey noises and act on that basis. Of course, it doesn't really make any difference to me. I've not myself watched a football match since we beat the Krauts in 1966, but I am a little bit touchy about the national anthem, and the only appropriate position when it is playing is to be on your feet. You can always kneel in private if you wish.